And the Americans, we know that the Americans and the Israeli regime, their capabilities are depleted. So Iran definitely will be hitting much harder this time. And Iran has said that if our critical infrastructure is attacked, we will retaliate decisively. And that means that the Israeli regime's critical infrastructure will be destroyed, and the critical infrastructure of these regimes in the Persian Gulf will be destroyed. And that will mean no more oil and gas for perhaps years to come. So Iran will be decisive this time around. Iran does not start wars because Iran is moral. We've been on the receiving end of 3 wars from the United States since 1980. Saddam Hussein, their proxy, back then last year, and this year.
Yeah.
Iran never escalates. Iran responds to escalation. But we should remember that when the Israeli regime bombed Iran's South Pars gas field, the Iranians hit back very hard at Qatar and the Emirates. And then Trump put out a Truth Social where he was literally begging Iran not to attack. He said, "I didn't know about this. Netanyahu will not do it again." This time, there will be no more Qatari, and I'm just saying this so our Qatari neighbors would know, there will be no more Qatari facilities. They'll be done with. And the Emirates will be finished. And all these regimes, if our critical infrastructure is struck, in this weather, all these regimes will have to empty. People will have to go to Iraq or to Oman because these places will be unlivable for American soldiers, diplomats, and for the ruling families and so on. It'll just be so. Iran is not going to start anything. Iran cares a lot about human life. We know this because in the last war, 3,400 or so and 450 or so people were murdered, Iranians. But at most 20 people in all these 5 countries were killed. Why? Because Iran was careful not to hit ordinary people. That is the truth. That's the same thing with the Israeli regime. Iran never targeted synagogues or schools. The Israelis targeted a synagogue in Tehran. They targeted schools. They carried out many double tap attacks. Yeah. They bombed many apartment blocks. One 15-minute walk from here, from where I am right now. Many, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure there are others too. I don't know them. But the point is that but if they launch a war and they go after critical infrastructure, the only deterrence is for Iran to hit back very hard, just like it did when they struck the South Pars gas field. So, and that will bring down the global economy. So the global economy is heading towards a great recession already. And if this continues for, 3-4 months, it will be a depression, I think. But if they go after our critical infrastructure and our oil and gas facilities and that sort of thing, we will take out everything. We will take out everything. And there will be nothing. There will be nothing to leave the Persian Gulf for years. And that will lead to global depression like nothing ever seen before in human history. So Trump and Netanyahu had better choose wisely. And their proxies in the Persian Gulf had to be very careful about their future, because once their countries collapse, they're not coming back. No one is going to allow them to be in charge of some future government in Doha or in Abu Dhabi or wherever. No one is going to accept that anymore. So they should be very careful. And Iran is going to be relentless. So hopefully these regimes will push back. And they could, by the way, stop this war. They could sign a joint declaration right now of the 5 countries and say, we will not allow the United States to use our airspace or our land or sea. We are opposed to war. But they're too cowardly or too compromised. Yeah. After all, a lot of them are in the Epstein files. Don't think that the Epstein people are just Americans and you have people in the Emirates. You have this woman in the Emirates who introduced her 12-year-old sister, one of the senior officials in the Emirates. I don't remember her name. She introduced her little sister to Epstein. I mean, these people are as corrupt as uh, the uh, the people in the Epstein files in the United States, the billionaires there. Their billionaire buddies here are no different.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why they exist in the way that they do, and it's certainly not of. They wouldn't exist if they were simply doing all this independently.
And one thing I should add, again, sorry, Danny, for forgetting, I'm growing old. This time around, escalation will be very swift.
Yeah.
And the Iraqi resistance, it will be very different from what we saw last time. Even though they were pretty active, it was only 10% of their capabilities. If there's going to be escalation, then this side will go up very swiftly. So the Iraqi resistance will be nothing. It will be nothing like what they saw last time. And Yemen, from what I've been told over the past few days, is fully prepared. They're rested, they are prepared, and if there's if there's escalation, they will shut down the Red Sea, and there will be no more oil or trade going through the Red Sea. So the Europeans, these family dictatorships, they should all think very carefully about what Trump is going to do to them, and the American people should understand that what Trump is about to do to them, whether he's compromised, whether they have, I don't know, footage of him doing something to little girls. I have no idea why he's so determined to destroy the United States. But I mean, he said himself that he doesn't care about the economic situation of American people. And remember, he repeats two lies. One is that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon. We know that his the anti-terrorist chief, anti-terrorism chief that he installed, Joe Kent, he installed him, said that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon, that Iran is not a threat to the United States. This is all about the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime. And we know that Tulsi Gabbard, under oath, said the same thing. We know that the International Atomic Energy Agency has been saying that has never shown evidence that Iran at any point has been trying to produce a nuclear weapon, even though the United States says since 2003. But the IAEA has never provided evidence of anything before then. And so there are two lies that he repeats. One's about a nuclear weapon, and he says they're going to make a nuclear weapon and then bomb all the cities in the world, like we're just out there to bomb nuclear. And you saw him say that to the kids and in the White House, and these Iranians are going to kill us all, kill you all. And then the second is, of course, the lie about 40,000 people, and all those people, those journalists and others who pushed that lie. They assisted the United States in carrying out these atrocities. They assisted Netanyahu in carrying out these atrocities, and they helped bring the world economy to where it is today.
Yeah, definitely true. I want to just actually make a comment on what you said earlier about Mohammad Ghalibaf, who seems to be obtaining many high roles in the Iranian, within the administration. And in large part, I mean, China will love this. He's incredibly competent. I mean, how many times have people shared just on X from his X account his economic analyses of the world situation? I mean, he understands that part especially well. He's demonstrated it, and now he will be maybe to Iran's most important economic partner. Be able to.
People should follow him. I mean, if they want to follow his account, they can find it on my Twitter account. Right. They can find his name, but they should follow him. He is important. The China file isn't like an extraordinarily complicated file, but it's just too much for the president because the president has too many things to do. The bureaucracy, and also he's running a country under war circumstances. So the negotiations file, the China file, they're not like something that would consume an entire day for Dr. Ghalibaf, but definitely they're too much for the president to be able to just to pursue this particular file, and it has to be someone who has the stature to get things done, to make a phone call to the president, say, well, the Chinese, we're doing this with the Chinese. There's this problem. It has to be someone who has to be able to make those phone calls and get things done. So it is an important move.
Yeah.
And he is a very competent person. He's known to be competent.
Yeah, well, his and this is so interesting. His last post was, "The world stands at the cusp of a new order. As President Xi said, the transformation unseen in a century is accelerating across the globe." End quote. And I emphasize that the Iranian nation's 70-day resistance has accelerated this transformation. The future belongs to the global South. So I think a very wise choice for Iran to put him in this position. And he's also head of the negotiations, which is also have gone very well on the Iranian side, in the sense that, while the U.S., I'm sure you saw their ridiculous maximalist demands, Iran hand over uranium, no ceasefire anywhere else in the region unless Iran talks to them, no reparations, and then someone like Ghalibaf, there's no caving here. It's just, well, here's our terms, and let's see which side will last longer in this. And it's quite. I think it's quite something to witness. It is it's a very critical moment.
Iran is a lesson for the world, and what Iran is doing today is doing the greatest favor for people across the world, even the American people, though they probably don't see it that way. But Iran is bringing down this empire. And it's not acting aggressively. It is basically determined to protect its sovereignty, and it is determined to protect the people of Palestine. I mean, at the end of the day, this is all about Palestine. This is all about Iran opposing genocide, whereas everyone else, all Western governments support genocide, and all the countries in the region are complicit in genocide. And the dirty war in Syria was to break Syria away from the axis of resistance, to put them on the same page with those regimes that are complicit in genocide. And all those people who were activists and helping shape public opinion to bring down the Syrian government, they were basically working for Israel. All those Wahhabis and Salafis and all those, secular, they were all doing the same thing. These extremist ISIS and Al Qaeda, they were tools of empire, and those people in the United States who were lobbying, and in Europe who were lobbying on behalf of them, funded by Qatar, funded by Erdogan, funded by others, funded by Western governments, they were all doing wittingly or unwittingly, they were strengthening the empire. And right now, look at Syria. Look at what Hezbollah is doing in southern Lebanon. It's amazing their steadfastness. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And yet look at Syria, completely quiet. Right now is the best time for Syria to push back at the Israeli regime and take back its territory. As Hezbollah is fighting to the west, they could with their much larger population, they have Turkey who's supporting this Al Qaeda regime. But they'll never do that because they were never supposed to do that. That was never the intention in the first one. This is a proxy regime. The ISIS Al Qaeda guy went to the White House, got his perfume, came back, and that's it. And so the Israelis have continued to occupy huge territories in Syria, and the regime, instead of using this opportunity to push back and to force the Israeli regime to pay a price for its occupation, is trying to strangle the resistance in Lebanon by shutting down the border with Syria. This is and all those people who are talking about jihad, and all those people who are supporting these crazy ISIS and Al Qaeda, Wahhabi, Salafi, crazy killers. Where are they now? Where are those people now who are talking about jihad, and those people who are talking about freeing Syria and supporting armed resistance? Where are they now? Where they supported them killing poor people on the coast, or Druze people in the south. But now that Hezbollah is hammering the Israeli regime when it becomes so outraged, in their rage, they go and bomb women and children in Lebanon. Every day they're slaughtering families. which doesn't get reported in the West. They're specifically targeting medics across Lebanon. But you won't hear this in the Western media because their journalists in Lebanon are a bunch of criminals. It's very interesting. In the Western media, whenever back then we'd complain about why are they quiet on Gaza, they say, well, we don't have a presence in Gaza. That was their excuse. Like, we all knew there was a genocide ongoing, but they say, well, we cannot confirm anything because we're not there. And then that was their excuse to basically help the Israelis. And then, but in Lebanon, there are more Western news agencies and reporters with offices and fixers and drivers and producers than anywhere in the Arab world compared to the population. But you're not getting the news about the atrocities being carried out. And when you do, you hear like Hezbollah strongholds, like when they mean like apartment buildings or hospitals or clinics. But they'll say Hezbollah strongholds, Hezbollah targets in order to hide them. So whether they're Western journalists, and of course I'm talking about mainstream legacy media, those who are somehow attached to these regimes, or the Epstein class. Whether they are present or not doesn't make a difference. Whether they're in Gaza or they're not in Gaza or they're in Lebanon, it does nothing for the reporting. There's, they support the Israeli regime, they support the child killers, and they are of course a part of the genocide. They all are, just like all the Western diplomats in Beirut, they are all supporters of genocide. Every one of them has blood on their hands. And if they had the slightest amount of decency, Western diplomats would now defect, or at least they'd resign, wherever they are in the world. But since they have no decency and they have no self-respect and they have no humanity, they will continue to get their paychecks, just like Western journalists will do the same. So I'm really, even though it's very sad to see what goes on in Lebanon, but I'm really glad that people can now see that the presence of journalists in Lebanon does not change anything. So their absence in Gaza was just an excuse. If they were in Gaza, their reporting would have been no different.
Yeah, those are great points, Professor Marandi. And as you know, and for the last 10 minutes or so here, I did have a question for you that I think helps reinforce and maybe expand upon this broader analysis that you put out there on the situation in the region. One question that came up in the audience.
Just one thing before you say that.
Sure.
If the Syrian regime, if this corrupt Al-Qaeda regime, which is just a proxy, if they chose to defend Syria against Israel, do you know who would be the first to send them support? Iran. Despite everything, Iran would be the first to send them support. The resistance in Iraq, Hezbollah, everyone. I mean, Erdogan wouldn't do anything for them, but Iran would give them all that they need to take back their territory. And while Hezbollah is fighting right now, this is the best time, because the Israeli regime is overstretched. But they won't. They have no intention of doing that. That was never the intention. And those people who helped bring about this situation, they helped the Israeli regime and they hurt the Palestinian cause. And they will try to pretend otherwise, and they'll try to distract attention and call it, say Assad was this or that. For Iran, the issue was never about Assad or his ethnicity or his race or his religion. It was all about the resistance. But these people were great assets to the Israeli regime. Yes, sorry for interrupting.
No. I think that's another important point. Given this larger situation that you outlined, and I think the Syria point is a really good one, given how the so-called Shara, I forget what his Al-Qaeda name was now, it completely slips my mind. Yeah, Jolani, the Jolani regime, just how disastrous it is now in this critical moment in history. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, we got a question from the audience saying, have you seen the leak about from Dmitry Lascaris about the conference in Athens? Israel apparently has an interest in keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed, what do we think about that? Now, this goes in line with an argument I've been hearing a lot about the Strait of Hormuz, which is that there are some friends of ours who are saying that the Strait of Hormuz being closed and in this current situation of like Iran, U.S. Navy standoff is beneficial to the United States and Israel. And I'm curious on what your thoughts are about that, especially in light of the news that Iran is really, they've come out with an insurance system now, really consolidating control over the Strait of Hormuz, and is very adamant that actually the strait isn't closed. But indeed, there is still this blockade thing, I guess you call it a blockade happening, and ships are being terrorized by the U.S. Navy. What's your thoughts on this question?
Well, first of all, we should always keep in mind that Iran has never closed the Strait of Hormuz. Never. It was never closed. Before the war, it was just business as usual. And Iran didn't take control of it at all. And it is not international waters, by the way. It is not wide enough to be international waters. These are Iranian and Omani waters. But then after the war, what the restrictions were for those 5 countries that were part of the war: Kuwait, Bahrain, the Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. They were murdering Iranians. They were not only hosting Americans on bases, they were hosting American forces off bases. And they were funding the war. The Americans were not renting these places. All American costs in all of these bases, and they were not like 5 or 6, they're large numbers of bases. All the costs were paid for. Everything. Every year, many billions of dollars were paid by these regimes to the Americans, and during the war. So they were very much a part. They killed our kids. They helped bomb our hospitals. So these 5 regimes, there were restrictions on their ships for obvious reasons. Were Chinese ships blocked? No. Were Russian ships blocked? No. Did ships go to Pakistan, to India? Yes, after negotiations. Ships that were coming from Iranian ports obviously had no problem. Those coming from Iraq had no problem. Those coming from these 5 countries, they had problems, but in some cases, after negotiations, they would allow some of them to go through if they're very important for countries that had not done harm to the Iranian people. So the Iranians had never closed the Strait of Hormuz. After the U.S. siege, which was a violation of the ceasefire, because the U.S. imposed the siege after the ceasefire. After the ceasefire agreement, remember, at the beginning of the war, Trump said, unconditional surrender. By day 39, it got so bad that he accepted the Iranian 10-point plan as a framework for negotiations. And then everyone attacked Trump and ridiculed him. And then his spokeswoman said, no, we threw it in the bin. But he accepted it. He posted it. So in the ceasefire agreement, they were supposed to end the killing in Gaza and Lebanon, especially Lebanon, because there was heavy fighting. And then there was no siege at that time, U.S. siege. And then the Iranians would allow more ships from those 5 countries to go through the Strait of Hormuz to ease the global crisis. This was a month ago, more than a month ago now, well over a month ago now, right? Like after 42, 3 days, I guess. I don't know. But then Netanyahu wrecked the ceasefire. He began carpet bombing Lebanon to undermine the ceasefire. And so the Iranians said, until he accepts the ceasefire, we're not going to let those extra ships go out, those extra ships. So the strait was open. Then ultimately, Netanyahu was forced to accept the ceasefire, although he began the slaughter after a day or two again. And then Iran said, okay, we'll let those ships through that were agreed upon. But Trump, who had just imposed a siege on Iranian ports, first he said that all the Persian Gulf, then he said Iranian ports. He said, great, but I'm going to keep the siege, which is a violation of the ceasefire to act the war. So the Iranians said, well, if that's the case, then we're not letting those ships out. So this was done by Trump and Netanyahu. Now, So we are where we are. If I can't say for certain. I don't speak on behalf of anyone, obviously, but if Trump was to force Netanyahu to end the slaughter in Gaza and Lebanon and to end the wars and to end the siege, then those ships would begin leaving the Persian Gulf and through the Strait of Hormuz.
Mm.
So Trump is the one who's destroying the global economy. Trump and Netanyahu. Now, whether this is good for Israel, I don't think so. I think it's good for Netanyahu because he wants war. Netanyahu wants a siege on Iran to weaken the Iranians. He wants war. He wants death and destruction because he needs this to stay in power. But do I believe that this is good for Israel? No. Why? Because it's not good for the United States. It's not good for the global economy. Why is that not good for the Israeli regime? Because just as the 2.5 years of genocide has made the world despise the Israeli regime, this global economic crisis is being done in the name of Zionism.
Yeah.
We saw Trump just say that I did this for Israel. Then he added, oh, well, these other countries too, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Qatar. And then he, as an afterthought, included Kuwait and Bahrain. The reason why it was those 3 countries after Israel was because those are the countries that pay him. These are countries that are really, they pay Kushner and Witkoff and other Zionists a lot of money. So, in my opinion, Trump definitely wants out. But from what we're hearing from Tucker Carlson, who met him, he said that he understood that this is not good news, but he went and did it anyway. And when you look at Joe Kent's resignation letter and his subsequent interviews, you get the same conclusion. So I think that the Israeli regime, the Zionists in charge, that they want war. So you're going to have war because they're the boss. They're the guys who own the United States. But is this good for Zionism? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. Because the world is going to say, look at India. India did its best to have, Modi was very pro-genocide. And look what the Israelis have done to the Indian economy. People are going to remember what they did to them. They're destroying the Indian economy. They're wrecking the global economy. So is this going to be good for the Israeli regime in the long term when ordinary Americans say this war, which was about Israel, wrecked our lifestyles, destroyed our jobs, drove inflation through the roof? Is that going to be good for Israel in the long run? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good for Israel at all. Is it good for Netanyahu? Yes, because Netanyahu needs crises. That's what these 2.5 years of war and genocide and death and destruction have been all about, to keep him out of prison, to keep him in charge. He has an election coming up. And why did his office expose the fact that he visited the UAE? And then when the UAE denied it, they went and said not only did he go, but the head of Mossad went, they had everyone went. Why was that the case? Because he was doing it, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. I don't have information. He was doing it for Israeli, the Israeli public. He wanted to say, look, I mean, he hasn't succeeded in Gaza. He's failed in Lebanon. Look at what Hezbollah is doing to him. So the only place where he succeeded, thanks to Qatar and Erdogan and others, was in Syria, partially. But Syria is going to be a problem. But that's for another day. But in any case, this is a success of sorts, to say that, look, I've made inroads into the Emirates. They're now a key ally of mine. They're the front line about my fight against Iran and so on. So, but look how, that is also damaging to Israel. Yeah. Why? Because you've humiliated your ally. You've destroyed their reputation. It's like, it's hard for me to say, but it's like a man or a woman having a secret and illicit relationship with someone who has a horrible reputation. Mm-hmm. And if it comes out, you're just that person, not you. That person is just destroyed. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yep. And then that person says, yes, I have relations with, so-and-so. So this... this hurts the Israeli regime, because now Qatar and the others are going to be extra cautious about their betrayals. I mean, we know they all have relations. I mean, Turkey transports Baku oil. Egypt, buys gas. Jordan facilitates trade. They're all in it together. But the Emirates took this to a whole new level. And the region, they hate these regimes. When Iran was bombing these countries in retaliation, people across the region were cheering, except for these Wahhabis and the Salafis and the people on the payroll. But everyone else was cheering because they know that who these people are and what these regimes are. But the point is that Netanyahu was doing it for the sake of Netanyahu. He exposed the relationship for the sake of Netanyahu, in my opinion. And so I don't believe that a lot of what's happening is in the long-term interests of the Israeli regime. The war in Gaza, I don't think is at all the genocide in Gaza. The Holocaust in Gaza is of long-term interest to the Israeli regime. It's destroyed the Israeli regime. It's despised across the world now. I don't think that the ongoing genocide and ethnic cleansing of southern Lebanon, especially with the heroic resistance of Hezbollah that we see today, the unbelievably heroic resistance of Hezbollah that we're seeing today, is going well for the Israeli regime. None of this is, but it's kept Netanyahu in power for 2.5 years. So I think that this is tragic. What's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. I have an Indian colleague who's very knowledgeable, and he tells me that this can lead to starvation in India, and if it's going to lead to starvation in India, you can imagine that it's going to lead to starvation in other parts of the world. So it is catastrophic for the world, but the world will not forget that this war was done by the Zionists, and it was imposed on the world by Trump and Netanyahu.
Yeah, the Indian economy is already,
and also, I mean, Danny, something that you and we discussed earlier. Look at the Democrats who are now saying this is terrible, this is awful. I mean, many ordinary supporters of the Democrats are anti-Israel now, but I'm talking about those who are in power. Are they anti-Israel? No. The senators? No. But they see where things are going. They see where even the Republicans, I'm sure many of them know where this is going, but they can't get off the ship now.
No, and the Democrats, as you said, if pushed in the same way as obviously Trump was, and they don't have necessarily a different track mind on Iran than Trump anyway. So it's, when the empire comes calling.
I remember when Biden was president, that's when the genocide began.
Yeah, that's true. And that was the precursor to all of this. Yeah. A few points, and then we can come to a close, Professor Marandi. In this talk about the UAE, I completely forgot about these so-called drones that have hit the UAE. At least that's from the reports of some backup power generator. And this, I don't have evidence of this, but this is my assumption, is that all of these strange attacks, especially on the UAE, I have a feeling that some Israeli assets somewhere in the region are firing these drones. That's my assessment, because I know Iran. I mean, come on, we've been talking for years. We've been following the 12-day war, the Epstein, whatever it is now, 70-day war, plus day war ongoing. We know Iran is going to announce when they attack someone. We know that they take pretty strict measures when they attack. And are usually doing it in self-defense, and they follow the laws of war. I mean, let's just follow how Iran has behaved throughout this war, and it's like very much to the T. This random, okay, there's a strike here and there. The UAE now is not even trying to blame Iran. It's very suspicious in my book, and I think it all goes into what we've been talking about, in the sense that I think some people are putting far too much into short-term gain, quote unquote. Even the profits, for example, for gas, LNG, oil. For someone who believes that, capitalism, imperialism, that these are like the roots of the problem, I think there are definitely moments in history, especially one like this, where there's a huge crisis and a huge fade happening for especially the U.S. empire. There are times when politics take command, and I just don't believe that somehow, some way, just these short-term riches that let's say Chevron, Exxon Mobil, these companies are making somehow will equate to the success of the empire in this way, especially given all of the other changes that are happening, and how you said on this program, and I 100% believe it, and I'm in the United States and I can see it and I can feel it. The economic crisis is huge right now. And while U.S. monopolies make a lot of money off of economic crises too, they also lose a lot in economic crises, always, right? They get smaller, they shrink in the U.S. A global stature economically diminishes, and that's just the facts. I mean, look at any graph of the U.S. economy from 1945 and the U.S. economy now. It's diminished. It's smaller. It is not as dominant, and that's going to continue. And I believe that's what leads.
The middle class,
right.
And when the middle class collapses, and when most people become poorer and poorer, does that create stability for those oligarchs, or does it make it more unstable for them? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a good. These people are not as brilliant as some people would like to say. I mean, I believe very much in God. I have no doubt in the existence of God. But some people are insistent that, how can there be a God? But then they give godlike qualities to these people. They're so sophisticated. Everything is under control. Everything is managed. Everything is, well, if they're so good at it, why is the United States in such bad shape? And why is the global South on the rise? Why are there so many whys? It's just, that's not, the fact is that this is a empire on the decline. When it was on the rise, it had, the luxury of carrying out many atrocities, and people would look away. In Vietnam, for example, initially ordinary Americans supported the Vietnam War, but then gradually people turned against it. Or at least a significant segment of society, enough to make the government to move away, to leave Vietnam. But still, the United States was a wealthy country. It was still the wealthiest country in the world by far at that time. So the stability of the country was never in doubt. But now, the country is a very different country. You've been to China. I've been to China. I've been to Moscow. I mean, Tehran. If you compare the Tehran underground, ask anyone who's been to Iran. Compare the Tehran underground to the New York underground. There's just zero comparison. Iran is like infinitely better, despite all the sanctions, despite the wars, despite the armed insurrections that Western intelligence agencies impose. No, these people they're wrecking the empire, and they're lashing out increasingly as things go downhill, and it's only making things worse. They're committing crimes, of course, beyond belief, but I don't see any method in this madness. I just see madness.
Yes, indeed. There was one final question, but I think we can answer it kind of briefly here. Does the rumored Saudi Middle East countries' terrorism against Mali, AES states, impact potential non-aggression pact with Iran and Saudi? Well, I don't know how. I think I don't even know how to answer that one, because it's. But
Mali?
If you have any thoughts, yeah, I guess there have been some attacks on. Terrorism.
But how would that be impact like a non-aggression?
I don't know.
Let me just put it. Let me just get to. And Saudi Arabia has to go a long way to address issues that are related to Iran. They've helped kill a lot of Iranians, and American planes were based in Saudi Arabia and using Saudi air bases. A lot of the and remember, a lot of the things that the Iranians were saying and they were denying during the war, like planes being destroyed and all that. Now we know that tens of planes were damaged and destroyed. Where were many of these planes? They were in Saudi Arabia. They were based in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has a long way to go. I mean, they may be rethinking, but they have to do a lot of rethinking.
Yeah.
But in any case, I hopefully, I mean, the days ahead will be probably bloody. There'll be lots of innocent people murdered by Trump and Netanyahu and the Trump regime.
Right.
And the killing in Lebanon is ongoing. Every day they're killing women and children. They're bombing medics, and Western journalists are shamelessly looking away. And every day they're slaughtering people in Gaza. It's just becoming outrageous. The genocide is ongoing.